Hey, what's up guys? I'm Josh and it is freezing out, but luckily I've had the WA-23 Luna here to warm my cold heart. Thanks to Woo for sending this out for as long as they have. This is just a loaner for me to do a review on. They're of course not paying or asking me to say anything good or bad. All thoughts and opinions are of course my own. I've probably had this for way too long, but I've loved every second of it. I think that this is an incredible amplifier in a number of ways. It's got incredible sound quality, it has incredible build quality, but those come with an incredible price tag. This thing is single-handedly the most expensive amplifier I've ever reviewed. Funnily enough though, I have another expensive amplifier that I'm going to be reviewing shortly after this, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, this thing is a beast in a number of ways. Now there's a lot of nuance to the sound quality of this, a lot of things to talk about. Now, not to throw any shade or start any drama with any particular person, but I think that when reviewers review very expensive products, they have a tendency to really communicate in a very overly eloquent way, a way that leaves you hearing a lot of words, but not really understanding what it actually sounds like and what you can expect to hear. I think it's going to be more important here to communicate effectively rather than try to sound like the smartest person in the room. This thing is dense. It is super dense. It is very heavy. And not only that, but all of your interaction points, the volume knob, the power button, everything about it just feels extremely solid. The potentiometer is expensive and dense and lush and feels like butter. It's just amazing. The tactility of the switches is next level. It's beautiful. The inputs and the outputs are relatively boring. I'll throw some shots up here so that you can see what it has available. But one thing to note, if you zoom in a little bit, you will see that it does say it is a single-ended amplifier, but you might notice that there's XLR inputs and XLR outputs. Why is that? Well, that's because this is not a balanced amplifier. This is a fully single-ended amplifier that just has XLR inputs and XLR outputs. Now, a few of you might be wondering like, okay, at this price point, why in the world would you have an unbalanced amplifier? And I think that to explain this, I would say that it really comes down to effectiveness versus technicality here. Given how good this thing sounds, I don't really care how they're doing it. I don't really care if there's a 3-inch tall little man riding a bicycle creating the sound, singing into a horn that is then playing into the headphone. Like, I really don't care if it's creating a sound that is actually pleasing, which this is. Now for the internals, this is a fully tube-driven Class A amplifier. As you would expect, it's got really high-end capacitors and potentiometer choices. This thing is really, really built very well. As far as the wattage output, they don't actually list how powerful this is. I do have a guess as to why. I think because on paper, it's probably not that impressive looking compared to other high-end amps. Some amps are pushing like 15, 18, 20 watts, as we'll see in future videos. But I think this is a bit like Rolls-Royce, right? On paper, not the highest power output, but in practice, it's sufficient. In practice, this runs everything I have, even up to AB 1266, really, really solidly. Now, Woo's been kind enough to let me hold on to this for far too long. It's been a great learning experience for me and a great comparative amplifier for other headphone amplifier reviews. And I think what's useful and nice to me for this is that it allows me to explore the best of a particular type of sound signature and kind of define if that sound signature is for me or not. And I think that in 2 words, in this particular order, is probably the best at explaining how this sounds. It is powerfully beautiful. Now, when it comes to sound quality, there are 3 defining characteristics of the sound quality. There's the dynamics, the tonality, and the details. Now, the details here are weird because there's this interesting matrix in how they are affected between the dynamics, the tonality, and just the general power output of this. Now, let me explain. Now, this part I suspect to be due to the Class A portion of this because of its power delivery, but the bass response is phenomenal. It is so solid. That mix of dynamics, the tonal properties, and just the overall punchiness of the bass response is really, really impressive. It's not quite to the level of just adding bass boost, but if you're going for a very clean, unbroken, powerful bass that doesn't give up, a bass that has all the transients or power or just raw drive that you're looking for, I think that this headphone will satisfy most people who are looking for that type of bass. And that was something that I found was pretty much unanimous across all of the headphones that I tried. Even headphones like the HD600, which are like just a benchmark headphone for audiophiles. I don't know if I've heard bass out of that headphone quite like I've heard it on this amplifier. It's very impressive. So my point here is that the details happen in places you may not expect, and they may not happen in places you might expect. There's a lot of really clear kind of ultra transparent amplifiers, things like the A70 Pro, A90D, things like that, HPA4 if you're into really high-end amps. Those sound ultra clean and ultra clear, and they're very good for that. And they're probably better at that than this is. However, it's like one step down from there. You get a ton of information with this. And like I said, it may pop up in other places that you may not expect. For example, because of its very slight roll off in the top end, you get a ton of focus in the mid-range and the bass response. And it's really exceptional there. Okay, distortion characteristics. This is a warm sounding amplifier. There is a little bit of a roll off in the top end in the most pleasing way possible because it maintains fidelity and detail, but it just kind of takes the edge off of most headphones. Now, this is a little bit difficult to explain in conjunction with how those dynamics act, because the dynamics can really change this in an instant, right? If you get a really bright treble forward note, you are going to hear that really bright treble forward note if it's in the music. And this amplifier is not going to completely quell that. But when you're listening to something that is perhaps a little bit squashed for dynamics, something that doesn't have that full massive dynamic range jump, this you will notice that top end sort of leans down a little bit. Now, unlike some other warmer tube amplifiers that I've tried in the past, this also doesn't sacrifice on soundstage at all. And I think this is one of the magical tricks that the tube amplifiers are kind of doing here, is allowing for a warmer sound with a very wide soundstage. And this plays in again with the tactility of all of the sounds, that specificity of the sounds, the solidness of the sounds, which is again unilateral across the entire sound signature. Now, the third defining characteristic for this, which is technicality. This is an ever-present constant in all of its regions. The treble response, while a little bit of a darker shade, is still very precise. The mid-range specificity, even with its really enjoyable tonal changes, it doesn't have this kind of loose body where you lose a lot of the focus and that kind of isolation that really good amplifiers can give a center vocalist. They separate from the background very well. Speaking of those background instruments, the specificity of imaging, which is also a technical aspect of this, is exceptional. It's very good. And then, like we already touched on, the bass response. All these factors are, on a technical level, in my opinion, very good. It's just a matter of tuning and tonal property shifts that you may or may not like. So what does this all translate to in the end for sound? What can you actually expect from this amplifier? You should expect a equal balance of warm and clear sound that has incredible dynamics throughout, bass response, mid-range, top end. All of that has incredible dynamics. It really enhances whatever your headphone is really good at. And all of that plays into a very open sounding soundstage. But I think as a person who's reviewed a lot of tube amplifiers and heard even more, the thing that makes us stand out is that tactility. That is an ever-present feature of this sound quality that, quite honestly, very few amplifiers have matched. Just the hardness of the sound without being unpleasant. It's just a really unique and pleasing combination of characteristics for sound, and I really enjoy it. Let's talk about headphone pairings with this guy really quick. There are two headphones that I think are my absolute favorite with this, or on this, using this, right? One of them is the Empyrean 2. The dynamic range capability of the Empyrean 2 really gets showcased with this amplifier. And not only is the overall dynamic range very good, the way that this headphone handles the tonal changes, the dynamic range for the bass response, it's just really amazing. This is already a very tactile sounding headphone. Like, you feel a lot, you hear a lot of specifics, you feel the solidness of sounds on its own, even without a ton of amplification. But on what is quite frankly an overpowered amp for that headphone, this is just a beautiful combination of sound signatures. It's just really pleasant. In my opinion, this is a perfect combination of technicality and precision and just raw enjoyability. The second headphone was the AB1266. Again, the characteristics of this headphone, I think, just paired really well with the characteristics of this amplifier. I couldn't be happier with this combination, honestly. The combination costs a lot of money, but if it's in the wheelhouse of what you can afford, this is a beautiful, beautiful pairing. When it comes to a headphone like the HC600, which a lot of you are familiar with, a very center-focused headphone, a very intimate sounding headphone, this doesn't change the properties of that very much. It's still a very intimate sounding headphone. It doesn't go into this very wide sound like some other tube amplifiers can do. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing on this, honestly. I like that it does whatever the headphones kind of natural gifts are. On headphones like the Empyrean 2 or the 1266, which are very wide sounding headphones, I think this complemented that very well. And it seemed as wide and as open as I've come to expect from high-end tube amplifiers. A couple of the pairings back there were the Diana V2 and the Aria Organic. Both of those actually matched really well with this. This sounds pretty good on just about everything. Unless you just really don't like warmth, I don't think that this has any negative standout characteristics for me. Personally, I just prefer a solid state amp for those other two headphones. Okay, last thing, if you're buying a tube amplifier for IEMS, you're doing it wrong. I wouldn't normally advise that, though, just because I'm a goofball, I had to try it. This is okay. It sounds really good when it's playing, but there is a little bit of background noise on the really efficient IEMS, a little bit of tube buzzing that you can hear when you're not playing anything, and then it's pretty much inaudible when you are playing something. So that is notable. It does work. It does sound good. It manages to be a very powerful amplifier. And when it plays IEMs, it doesn't sound jumpy. I made sure though that I was always on low gain and always on the low impedance setting on this. I wouldn't even mess with the high impedance stuff personally. Now, when it comes to overall sound quality, this is my favorite WU amplifier yet. When it comes to build quality, I think it's also the best built. This has a better finish to it, a better denseness to it than that of things like the WA-23, which is the previous flagship for WU. I also like the design language, and the dial interaction is just a lot more solid than previous generation WU amps. So I'm very impressed with this on both a build level and a sound level. Okay, that's it. I want to thank WU for sending this out for as long as they did. I really do appreciate it, and I will get this back to you right away. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.